Hilchos Ishus Perek Shloisha ve'Esrim, the laws of marriage, chapter 23. We're really closing out these laws. We're going to finish in 3 days. On Shabbat, we finish these laws, and you can kind of see how the Rambam is also closing out his discussions on marriage. We've covered all the biblical and rabbinic obligations of a husband to a wife and a wife to a husband, and today the topic is different conditions that could be made to change some of the typical rights. Because there are certain rights that you cannot make a condition about. For example, relations. You can never say, I'm getting married with no relations. That doesn't work. But any monetary stipulations that come with a marriage, you could make a condition to undo them. And so we're going to see about that. And then we're going to see at the end of the chapter different local customs that could affect marriages. The way they used to write out the document and different commitments people will take upon themselves to show that they're generous. So that's where we're headed today. As we go into the first part of the chapter, we should know that when it comes to the wife's property, a husband has 3 basic rights. Number 1, he can veto a sale or a gift. That means because he has rights to the property, if she wants to sell it off, he can stop them from doing it. Second, while she has the property, he can stop the sale. Second, while she has the property, he can eat the fruit. And thirdly, if and when she dies, he inherits the property. So keep in mind those 3 levels, and a lot of the things are going to become very clear in the beginning of the chapter. It says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Ha'isha shehisnes al baila. A woman makes a condition with her husband, levatel zchus midvarim shezeicha behen abal, to cancel some of the rights that the husband might usually have. Im kasav la va'oida arusa kedem hanisuin. If the husband writes down, see the picture here? I forfeit my rights. He writes it clearly on a document. And he writes down whatever it is, while she's still betrothed, before the nisuin. That means he already gave her the ring, right? So they're already mikudesha, it's already kiddushin, but there's no nisuin yet. So then, because before nisuin he actually has no rights physically, there's no need to even make an official act of acquisition to verify what he's saying. Whatever he writes in the shtar, in the document, is going to be valid. Because nothing came to his hand yet, so he can deny or forfeit from himself anything that he wants. If he's writing this document, I forfeit my rights. After the marriage was already consummated, then the only way to show that he's serious is if you make an actual act of kinyan, an act of acquisition, that shows that he's serious. That's the basic principle. There's a massive difference before and after the nisuin. Now let's get into the specifics. Halacha beis. What if the wording on the document was, the condition is, I don't want to have anything to do with your property. So, like I said before, there's 3 elements to the property. There's vetoes of sale, there's using the fruit, and there's inheritance. Which one did he mean? He says, I have nothing to do with your property. Does it mean everything? Does it mean some of them? So the sage just said it only means the smallest one. Imachra v'nasna. Now, if she sells the property or gifts the property, michro matan takayam. The sale and the gift is valid. That's the only thing he relinquishes, that right of veto. But he still gets to eat the fruit, so long as they're still in her possession. But if she was before nisuin, if it was before the marriage, and they made a extra act of acquisition, which isn't required. Remember before, if it's before the nisuin, no acquisition is required. If he went ahead and he did an acquisition, and then he said, She'ein lo yidinu dvarim b'nechaseha, he said, I want nothing to do with your property. So because he did an extra thing, he wrote the document, and he made a kinyan when it wasn't required. So now the sages said, you went up 2 steps. You've removed yourself completely from the land, and you don't get any fruit from her property. Because you did an extra act of commitment, so you take away an extra one of your rights. Even if later on he protested his own kinyan. And he said, I never meant that. I never imagined that I would lose rights to the fruit because of this act of acquisition that I'm doing. All I meant was to relinquish my right of veto, that if she sells it, it'll be a valid sale. Which man in his right mind is going to marry a woman with no property? I never meant to take away my rights to her property. Says that I'm too bad. We don't listen to him. By making that contractual act of acquisition, you've removed yourself from the land on all levels, both the right of veto and the right of fruit. Halacha Gimel, if you specify fruit, hisna ima shelo yechal peres nechaseha, if the only stipulation was that I'm not going to eat any of the fruit of your property, so even though it sounds like he's fully relinquished his right to fruit, says the Rambam there's a workaround. And true, whatever property she has now, you cannot eat those fruit. But sell the fruit, buy new real estate, and the fruit from that real estate he'll be able to eat. All he removed himself was from these properties. New properties, no problem. So take the fruit, sell them, buy new land, and the new fruit she can eat. He can eat. What were you saying?
He can sell the fruit.
He should sell the fruit.
He should sell it.
Yeah, and get himself some new access to types of fruit. But what if he said Halacha Dalid hisna ima shelo yochal peres nechaseha v'lo pere sehen? He said, I'm not going to have the fruit from this land, nor the fruit of the fruit. So now, even if you sell the fruit and you buy new land, that's fruit of the fruit. So what should you do, says the Rambam? Loikhin peres, take the fruit, v'kainin bahem karka, buy real estate, v'loikhin peres karka zu, take the fruit of that real estate, v'kainin bahem karka shniya, and buy a second real estate, v'hu eichal peres elu, and then you can eat the fruit of that one, shehin pere peres, which are fruit of the fruit of the fruit. Because you only said I'm not going to have anything to do with fruit of the fruit. You didn't say fruit of the fruit of the fruit. So once it's third step removed, you're good again. So just keep converting the fruit into new real estate, and you get to have the ultimate level at the end of the fruits. The and the matter continues so constantly unless he clearly states ad sheyasne ima, until he makes a stipulation shelo yiu loy peiros v'loy pere seyan ad lo'olam. If he says I'm not going to have fruits nor the fruit of the fruit until forever, then he's removed himself completely. He'll never get any types of fruit in her lifetime, but only in her lifetime. If she dies, he still gets to inherit, because that third level you never relinquish. Even if he relinquishes the rights to veto, the rights of the fruit, but he didn't relinquish the right of inheritance. So while in her lifetime, no benefit is allowed, after death, he inherits her. Says the Rambam on the other hand, what if he only relinquished the inheritance right? If he makes a condition, I forfeit my rights to inheritance. Good. He doesn't inherit her. But he still maintains the right to eat the fruit of her property while she's alive. Or if he makes a stipulation, a partial stipulation. I'm only going to inherit some of your property. Or, pretty reasonable condition, says, you know what, if the marriage ends and we're childless, then all of your property goes back to your father's home. Hakil kayam. In all cases, the stipulation is binding, it's valid, because monetary stipulations are allowed. When do stipulations about inheritance work? Only before marriage. Because inheritance which is coming to a person from outside of his family, in other words, through his wife, he can make a condition that it won't come to him so long as it's before he was fitting to accept it. But if the condition is only made after the marriage, in other words, they're already married, they're already connected, and now he says, if you die, I don't want to inherit you, t'noi batel. That's actually cancelled condition, v'yirashena, and he must inherit her, k'may shebiyarnu, as we explained way back in chapter 12. The Rambam said, even though it's a rabbinic concept that a husband inherits his wife, the sages wanted to give their enactment such strong validity as a biblical concept. And so the same way you cannot make a stipulation to violate biblical law, you cannot make a stipulation to remove yourself from inheritance. Before the marriage, yes. After the marriage, not. Okay. So we've seen a guy who relinquishes his rights to vetoing sales, relinquishes rights to fruit, relinquishes rights to inheritance. Can you relinquish all the rights together? Check out this language. Hisna ima achar nisuin. After the marriage, he makes a condition that includes everything. He wants nothing to do with her property. Nor does he want the fruit or the fruit of the fruit till forever. Not in her lifetime or in her death. Seems to have covered everything. I don't want your property. I'm not going to veto the sales. I don't want the fruit, even after death. Says the Rambam, true, you get to eat no fruit at all. But you still get to inherit her, as we explained. Why? Because he made the condition after the marriage. Even if it has a whole bunch of other things inside the condition, but the inheritance part never works. Because after marriage, there's no canceling the inheritance. Let's go for a moment to a husband's right to property and remind ourselves again, it comes up again and again and again, two types of properties a woman could bring into a marriage. Nichsei tzoin barzel, iron sheep, guaranteed fixed value properties. Nichsei meloig, usufruct properties. The property belongs to the woman, the husband uses the fruit. Says the Rambam, what if a husband spends some money on his wife's usufruct properties? She brings in an apple orchard, okay? He knows he only gets to eat the apples from this orchard. But he figures, you know what? Let me spend some money, improve the land quality. Maybe you'll grow better apples, and I can make more money. So he spends money on his wife's nichsei melog, the usufruct. Bein shehoitzi ma'at v'achal peres harbe. Whether he spends a little bit and he ends up deriving a lot of benefit, eating a lot of fruit. Bein shehoitzi harbe v'achal peres ma'at. Maybe he spends a lot, not a good businessman, and he only brings in a little bit of profit. Va'afilu achal gregeres achas derech kaved. Even if he ends up eating only one fig size of fruit in an honorable manner at his table. Or he eats a dinar's worth. It's a coin, certain coin's worth, even in a haphazard manner. Not at home, he just eats it off the field. Even if the only profit that he made is not even any fruit, just a bundle of twigs, what you spent, and what you ate, you ate. In other words, because your wife is the real owner of the property, no benefits or losses have anything to do with you. Doesn't matter how much you spent and how much you made. Whatever you spent, whatever you made, you made. You can't ask her for reimbursements just because it was a bad year. It's her land. Halacha test. Similar concept, if a woman inherits funds in a distant place. You're married to her, and you hear one day her uncle died, $10 million, in another country. And the husband, he knows it belongs to his wife, this money, but he figures, you know what, I'll spend some money, pay some lawyer's fees, pay some traveler's fees, and he gets the money here. Once he has the money, he then uses the money to buy real estate, and he gets fruit from it, and he's eating fruit from his land.
Proportionally to what he spent.
Proportionally means the shiur we mentioned in the last halacha. Even eating a fig size or a dinar size. In other words, he ate enough to qualify as eating.
See, this is the difference between Israeli and Hebrew.
Yes, exactly, halachic Hebrew. It doesn't matter how much he spent, if it's disproportionate or not. The fact that he ended up deriving benefit from this property already makes up, so to speak, for the fact that he spent, and whatever he spent, whatever he ate. And he cannot ask for reimbursements. But if he ended up just spending money on the land and never got any fruit in return, or he ended up eating less than the required amount, so here, it's proper to make some kind of reimbursement. So what do? We ask him, we appraise how much did the land go up in value, and he ate no fruit, but the land may have went up in value. And we also ask him how much he spent. So we compare expenses to the increment of the property. Im hashvach yesar al ha'itza. If the increment is more than his expenses, yishava b'nikitas chayfetz kama ha'itzi. He has to swear a biblical oath, holding a sacred object, how much he spent. V'noitel ha'itza, and he's reimbursed the amount that he spent. But the increment remains his wife's because it's his wife's property. V'im ha'itza yasir al hashvach. If it ends up that he actually spent more than the increment that he created, he doesn't get reimbursed the entire expenses, only the amount of the increment. In other words, you always reimburse the lesser amount. Ubishvua, even that he only gets with an oath. But again, this is only if he eats no fruit at all. If he eats any fruit at all, he gets no reimbursement. If he eats no fruit at all, he gets reimbursed for the lesser amount, either the expenses or the increment. Says the Rambam, when do we say that there's no reimbursement once you eat something, be megarish. If the marriage is dissolving because of divorce. Aval ha'isha shemarda al baila, but if the marriage is dissolving because the woman rebelled against the husband, she's withholding relations, in which case, after a while, we force the marriage to end. Afilu ochal harbe, even if the husband ended up eating a lot of fruit from the property. Shamin lekama ochal, we estimate or we appraise the entire amount of how much he ate. Upoiches oisoi, mimasheroi litin le min ha'itza achar sheyishava v'noitloi. And then we imagine, as if it were a regular case where there were no fruit, how much should he have gotten as reimbursement for his expenses, subtract the amount of fruit that he ate, and reimburse him for whatever remains. So let's say he spent 100K on expenses, right? And he ended up eating $50,000 worth of fruit. Usually, just the fact that he ate fruit already cancels his reimbursement. But if the marriage is dissolving because of the woman, so we say, okay, 50K we're not going to pay because you ate 50K. But the other 50K, we're going to reimburse you. Shaloi hikna Allah, after an oath. Shaloi hikna Allah kedesh titalat v'teitza me'atzma. You never gave her this money, or you never spent this money on her land just for her to take, to go away and leave. If she ends the marriage, she instigates the divorce, you're going to get pretty much full reimbursement for whatever you spent. Similar concept, if you spent money on properties belonging to a minor wife, girl underage, and the plan was she was going to stay married after she gets, after she reaches majority, and have a beautiful life happily ever after. But she turns bat mitzvah, and she refuses, which is allowed. She can dissolve the marriage through simply refusing, no need for a divorce or anything. But boom, the whole marriage is out, and you spent money on her property while she was a kid. So here we check, see how much he ate. How much did he spend? How much did he make? How much did the property rise in value? Like artist, and we treat him like a regular sharecropper and pay him out with reimbursement. He didn't violate any issues here. He went down with permission. He spent money on his wife's property with permission, thinking that it's going to be a good marriage. She dissolves it. Her fault. He gets more reimbursement than usual. And now the Rambam kind of segues to a new concept. How local customs can affect a marriage. There are many customs when it comes to the nedunya. Nedunya, again, is a general name for all properties that a woman brings into a marriage. So in the ketubah, as we've seen, this is like two different types of ketubahs. One is for a virgin, one is for a non-virgin. You write in the text here, it's written how much the husband commits to his wife, and how much, if indeed the wife brings in property, how much she brings in. So the Rambam tells us there was a couple of customs as to how to write down that amount. There are many customs when it comes to writing down the amount of property a wife brings in. Some places have a custom. We evaluate the actual amount, and then we increase that amount in the written word by a third or by a fifth or by half. For example, let's say she brings into the actual marriage $100. In the document, we'll write 150. To make it look more generous in the eyes of the public, because this ketubah we read at the marriage, people will hear it. So they're going to say, 150, that sounds gishmak. Even if she only wrote only 100. But since this is the common understanding, when she comes, if the marriage dissolves, when she comes to collect the money, she only gets 100, because we know 150 means 100. Other places write the opposite, they do less. Don't write the full amount, always write less. Therefore, if in the document it says, I'm going to bring in $100, really it means she must bring in 120 or 150. And we just write that she brought in 100. That's the custom. You write less than what it actually is. Other places, they're just normal. The right amount of 100 is 100. That's as far as the wife bringing into the husband. In addition to that, there are places that have a custom. That according to how much the woman brings in, the man would also commit a specific amount, proportionate to the nedunya, which the woman could use for jewelry or for perfume, things like that. Other places was the custom for a man to bring in some property, proportionate to the nedunya. To add to the nedunya to make it look more beautiful. Point is, all these types of commitments, all these different customs. How much she writes, how much he writes. Says the Rambam, Hanoisei Stam. Because in Jewish law we take local custom very seriously, when somebody gets married with no stipulation, he must write his ketubah and give according to whatever the local custom is. If she promises to bring in property into the marriage with no stipulation, she must give, she must provide according to the local custom. And if the marriage dissolves and she collects her ketubah money, we also pay out according to the standards of local custom. Whatever you give, if it's less, it's more, depending on the way they write the ketubah. In all these matters, and anything like it, minhag hamedina ikar gadelhu. The local custom is a huge principle. Piv danin, we can actually make court cases based on it. We take local minhag very seriously. Of course, it has to be widespread. It can't just be, this block's custom. It has to be well known. In this city, this is how we do it. Yeah, this is related to that, exactly. Halacha Yud Gimel, Ish v'Isha, Shahayu b'neim shiduchin. If there was a man and a woman who were engaged, and here we mean like today's engagement, where there was no actual act of kiddushin, just a verbal commitment. The Amar La, while they're engaged, the man tells the woman, hey, kamat machnesasli, how much property are you bringing into the marriage? Kach v'kach, she says, so and so. The Amar La, then she says to him, how much are you giving me? How much are you writing to me? Kach v'kach, he says, this is so and so. Same thing if the conversation would happen through the parents. Two fathers are talking. How much are you giving for your son? So much and so much. How much for your daughter? So much and so much. If, right after that conversation, the husband gives the wife the ring, the previous conversation goes into effect. Those promises are binding. Even if there was no contractual act of obligation, just the words, because they're already engaged and there's a closeness with marriage, so those words have an extra power over and above the usual power in halacha. These are called commitments that are established through speech. Very rare. Usually, whenever you make a commitment, it has to be some kind of a affirmation. Pick up a cloth or whatever. Here, just the words commit you.
It is dissolved in between, then it's all not valid?
Dissolved after you gave the ring or before?
Before.
No, then it's not valid. But if you gave the ring right away, it's valid. When do we say? This is a caveat for the second class, the second part. When do we say that a father can promise on behalf of his daughter and son? And it goes into effect. If it's the father doing for his daughter or the father doing for his son, first marriage. Because a person's mind is close to his son. In other words, he feels he quicker obligates himself when it comes to his son. Because it's a great joy, the first marriage, he has decided to completely hand off the rights just by his words. But if it's a brother doing it for his sister, or a mother doing it for her daughter, or other relatives, or if it's a father, but it's the second marriage, here, the words do not go into effect unless you do an actual act of acquisition, because second marriage isn't so powerful, or also a brother or a mother doesn't have that kind of financial power. Halacha Tezvav. When a father does indeed commit himself to give property to his daughter, the daughter doesn't get the rights to that property until the husband actually consummates the marriage. Also the son. You can't say, Dad, you're promising the money, give it now. No. When you'll get married, I'll give it to you. Any father who promises money is only doing it with the intent that the marriage is going to actually happen. Therefore, If a prospective father-in-law tells his daughter, listen, when you get married to that guy, I'm going to give such and such money, and the guy dies, the marriage couldn't happen. And she, because they were already engaged, she already gave kiddushin, she now has to marry the brother of this guy. Yibum, a levirate marriage. At this point, the father-in-law can tell the guy, the new guy, listen, your brother, I wanted to give him the money. And you, I don't want to give the money. In other words, since the marriage didn't happen, and the whole intent was for the marriage to happen, if it doesn't happen, he can change his mind. Even if the original guy was an ignoramus, and the new brother is a very wise man, or if the daughter actually wants to marry him, doesn't matter. The father can say, I gave the commitment for that guy, not for this guy. A prospective father-in-law promises money to his son-in-law and then takes a trip. Boom, he leaves. The son-in-law says, look, I don't want to get married till I have the money. This new wife can tell the husband, listen, I didn't make the commitment. It's my dad. It's his problem, not mine. What can I do? I don't have the money. He's away on a trip. So here's my offer. Either marry me with no nedunya. If my dad gets back, maybe he'll give it, but for now, just marry me, or let me go with the get. Because I didn't make the commitment. But if it was her who made the commitment, she promised, I'm going to bring you in $10,000 of properties, and she couldn't afford it. She cannot force the husband to divorce her. She must sit there, pay it up, find your property, or till she dies. Because the husband will say, I only want to marry you with the money. No money, no marriage. Why doesn't this woman make a trick? Just rebel against her husband, say, I'm not going to give you relations. And that'll force her out of the marriage. Says the Rambam, that trick won't work here. Usually when a woman rebels while she's in a state of engagement, after kiddushin, before nisuin, the situation typically is where the husband wants her and she doesn't want to stay in the marriage. But in this case, the husband doesn't even want her yet till she gives the nedunya. And she wants him. It's the opposite. She wants to get married because she's saying, marry me or let me go. So by rebelling, she won't undo that. Rebelling means, you want me, I'm not giving you me. This is, you don't want me, I want you. How could you rebel against that? When do we say these laws? If she's an adult. But if it's a minor girl who promised money and now she can't afford it, then we do force the guy to either end the marriage with a get or take her in with no nedunya, because she's a minor. She can't make those kind of huge decisions on her own account. Another custom which could affect the marriage. A man marries a woman. She had a daughter from another marriage. He says, look, I'll feed your daughter. I'll feed your daughter for so many and so many years. He must follow through with that commitment. Whatever amount of years he promised, he's got to pay for her funds for her support. So long as they make that commitment when he gives her the ring. But if it isn't during the commitment, during the kiddushin time, then they must do a contractual act of obligation or write it down in a document, as will be explained in the 12th book of the Rambam in the laws of sale. But if it was done during the kiddushin, you must keep the commitment. What if the marriage went south? He tells the wife, listen, I promised to pay money for your daughter for 6 years. 3 years later, they're divorced. And she gets married to somebody else. And that new husband also promises to pay for the daughter's funds. So the original guy still has 3 more years to go of his condition, and the new guy also promised, let's say 3 years. And the first husband cannot say, if she comes to me, I'll feed her. But by her, no, I'm not going to feed her. Doesn't work. He must keep his obligation going. You promised 6 years. I don't care what happens in 6 years. You got to pay. Bring the food to where the mother is and pay the daughter. The two husbands also cannot be in cahoots. They can't say together, look, we'll feed her together. No, she gets double food. One will actually give her food, and one will give her the money worth of the food. It gets even more complicated. What if a daughter gets married? So now she has two fathers that are paying for her food, plus her husband. The husband has the primary obligation to pay for her food. And both of her mother's former husbands have to keep paying for her food, money, not actual food. So she's getting 3 times the amount of food. Good for her. What if the husband's died? This guy promised to give his daughter food for 6 years. He dies in the middle. If the original agreement was done with a kinyan, with an act of acquisition, or at least written in a document, she is treated like a creditor who has a document. She can keep on expropriating the worth of her funds from his original properties till she finishes the commitment. But if it was only a verbal agreement during the kiddushin, there was no actual act of acquisition to affirm it, they go into the category of things that weren't written down, and she cannot expropriate any property for her funds. The guy died, it's over. But while he's alive, he's got to see the commitment through to the end.